She saw a familiar face in the Epstein documentary and suddenly remembered the day she almost got into the car. Have you ever looked back at a single quiet moment in your life and felt a chill crawl up your spine? Because you realize you weren't just being invited somewhere. You weren't just a kid in the wrong place. You were being selected. When I was 13 years old, I stood on a curb and almost stepped into a car I was never supposed to get out of. And the most terrifying part? In that moment, I didn't even know I was staring at my own ending. None of it made sense. Not the way he looked at me or the way he held that door open. The puzzle pieces didn't click for 16 years. Until I was sitting on my couch, watching a documentary and saw a face that stopped my heart. I grew up in South Florida. Most people think of palm trees and vacation, but for me it was just heavy, the air was thick, and my life was tighter. Strict doesn't even begin to describe my parents. It wasn't just rules, it was a total blackout. No phone calls after school, no sleepovers, no hanging out at the mall. If it wasn't school or church, I was under their roof. And school? School wasn't an escape. My dad worked at my school. Think about that for a second. Even my hallway behavior was being monitored in real time. I didn't have a childhood, do you? I had a 24-hour surveillance feed. I wasn't a kid. I was a project under constant supervision. When you live like that, you don't learn how to navigate the world. You just learn how to hide. You learn how to wait for the first crack in the door so you can run through it. That crack appeared when I hit middle school. For the first time, there were corners of the building my dad couldn't see. There were minutes between classes where I belonged to myself. To a normal kid, middle school is a mess of hormones and bad haircuts. To me, it felt like absolute freedom. And when you've been locked in a dark room your whole life, even a flickering candle looks like the sun. I was desperate. I was hungry for connection. Making friends didn't just feel important. It became my entire identity. I wanted to be seen by anyone who wasn't a parent or a teacher. That's when they walked into my life. Sharon and Heather. They were everything I wasn't allowed to be. Loud, bold, unfiltered. At the time, I thought Heather was the coolest, most sophisticated girl I'd ever met. I thought she was my ticket to the real world. But looking back now, with everything I know, she might have been something else entirely. Heather wasn't just a friend. In the ecosystem of a South Florida middle school, Heather was something else entirely. She was untouchable. You know that girl? The one who seems to operate on a different set of physics than the rest of us? She didn't have a curfew. She didn't have check-ins. While I was counting the minutes until my dad picked me up, Heather was doing things I only saw in movies. She could stay overnight at boys' houses. She went to parties in neighborhoods I wasn't even allowed to drive through. To a normal person, those are flashing neon red flags. They scream danger or lack of guidance. But to me, a girl who lived in a glass box, that wasn't danger. That was the most beautiful freedom I'd ever seen. I didn't want to judge her. I wanted to be her. I wanted to breathe the air she was breathing. We became what we called the tripod. Heather, Sharon, and me. We were a closed circuit. Same honors classes, same table at lunch, same inside jokes that no one else understood. We were inseparable, but the power balance was clear. Heather was the sun, and Sharon and I were just planets, caught in her gravity. But there was a constant buzzing problem. A tripod only works if all three legs are in the same place. And I was never allowed to go anywhere. Every Monday, I'd have to listen to them talk about the weekend. Every Friday, I'd have to endure the invitation. Come hang out just for an hour. Come with us to the boardwalk. Just this once, tell your parents you're at the library. I kept saying no. I had to. I knew if I got caught, the supervision would turn into a total lockdown. I felt like I was failing a test of loyalty. I felt like the boring friend who was holding the group back. I think Heather sensed that guilt. She knew the no's were wearing me down. So one Tuesday afternoon, sitting at our usual lunch table, she stopped asking me to hang out. She changed the game entirely. She didn't ask me to come over anymore. She asked me to do something different, something that felt small, almost insignificant. But looking back, it was the small thing that leads to the end of everything. 2 words. That's all it took to shift the trajectory of my entire life. Skip school. To most kids, skipping school is a rite of passage. But to me, it felt like planning a heist. My life was built on a foundation of not getting caught. I knew it was a catastrophic idea. In South Florida, if you aren't in your seat by second period, the robocall goes out. One phone call to my house, and my world would end. My parents wouldn't just be mad, they'd be disappeared from the map mad. I told Heather no. I told her no on Monday, I told her no on Tuesday. But Heather didn't stop. Every day at that lunch table, she'd lean in, her voice dropping to a whisper, making me feel like I was the only person in the world who mattered. She'd say, "Don't you want to live for once? Don't you want to have a story that isn't about your parents?" And slowly, the fear started to mutate. It didn't go away, it just turned into this vibrating, electric excitement. I wanted to be the girl who took the risk. I wanted to be part of the tripod for real. So, we spent the next week planning. We didn't just talk about it, we mapped it out like a military operation. Step 1, the drop-off. My mom pulls up to the curb. I kiss her cheek. I walk through the front doors of the school. Step 2, the exit. As soon as her taillights vanish, I walk straight through the back gym doors. Step 3, the meetup. We walk 3 blocks to the nearby gas station, the one with the broken sign and the smell of hot asphalt and cheap coffee. Simple. It was so incredibly simple. Heather said one of her older friends would be there to pick us up, a guy with a car. In middle school, a guy with a car is like a god with a chariot. I didn't ask who he was. I didn't ask why he wanted to hang out with 3 13-year-olds. I was too busy feeling brave. But there was one detail, one specific thing Heather kept repeating. She said it every time we went over the plan, over and over. It was a detail I didn't understand back then. I thought it was just a rule. I had no idea it was a checklist. Wear something that makes you look innocent. That was the phrase. Not wear something cute, not wear something cool so the guys like you. Innocent. Heather said it every single day that week. Sometimes she'd say it casually like she was giving me fashion advice. Other times she'd look me dead in the eyes and repeat it twice. Wear something that makes you look really innocent. At 13, you don't have a vocabulary for grooming or predators. I was a straight A student with a Disney Channel life. I was innocent. So I didn't question it. I thought maybe it was part of the disguise. You know? Like, if I looked like a good girl, the police wouldn't stop us for skipping school. I thought it was a strategy to avoid the cops, not an invitation for a monster. I remember standing in front of my mirror that morning. I picked out a light-colored top, something modest. I brushed my hair flat. I looked exactly like the kind of girl who stays in her lane and follows the rules. I felt like I was playing a character. I didn't realize I was being dressed for a stage I never asked to be on. Looking back, that was mistake number one. I was listening to the directions of a girl who was already miles ahead of me in a world I didn't even know existed. The day finally comes. Everything goes perfectly. I kiss my mom goodbye. I walk through the front doors, and 3 minutes later, I'm slipping out the back. My heart is hammering against my ribs so hard I can feel it in my throat. I'm terrified, but for the first time in my life, I feel alive. I'm not the teacher's kid or the supervised project. I'm just a girl on the run. We start the 3-block walk to the gas station. It's that heavy South Florida heat. The sun is beating down on the pavement, and you can see the heat waves shimmering off the road. But as we get closer, the high of skipping school starts to evaporate. The vibe shifts. I notice Heather's phone isn't just buzzing, it's screaming. Call after call, text after text. Her hands are moving fast, typing back with a look on her face I'd never seen. It wasn't cool Heather anymore, it was business Heather. I caught a glimpse of one of the messages. I heard her mutter something under her breath. Just meet us at the gas station, like we usually do. That word, usually, it hit me like a physical weight. Usually implies a pattern. Usually implies this wasn't their first time. This wasn't a one-off adventure for them. This was a routine. I looked at Sharon. She was quiet. Too quiet. She wouldn't look me in the eye. She just kept her head down, walking toward that gas station like she was walking toward a chore. Suddenly, the gas station didn't look like a meeting spot. It looked like a boundary. I felt every instinct in my body telling me to turn around. My legs felt heavy, like I was walking through water. We rounded the corner of the building, past the air pumps and the trash cans. And there, idling in the back of the lot, was the car. That's when I saw them. And that's the exact moment everything stopped feeling like a game. I realized I wasn't at a meetup. I was at a delivery. When we rounded that corner, I expected to see a few friends. Instead, I saw a crowd. There were about 7 girls already there, huddled in the shade of the gas station wall. They were all our age. Some looked 12, maybe 14. I recognized a few faces from the hallways at school, girls I'd seen at lockers or in the gym, but others were complete strangers. The energy was strange. It wasn't the sound of kids skipping school to have fun. It was higher, more desperate. And the way they reacted when they saw Heather, it was like a queen had just arrived. They didn't just greet her, they surrounded her. Like she held the keys to a door they were all dying to walk through. Heather didn't waste time with small talk. She stood in the center of that circle, radiating a terrifying kind of authority. She looked at these 7 young girls and yelled one question. Who's ready to make some money? They cheered. That high-pitched, innocent sound of teenage girls cheering, but for a sentence that should have made our skin crawl. Make money? Doing what? At 13? The electric excitement I'd felt minutes ago was gone. It was replaced by a cold, leaden weight in the pit of my stomach. I reached out and grabbed Sharon's arm. I squeezed it hard, trying to pull her back into reality. I whispered to her, my voice shaking, Sharon, what is she talking about? What money? What are we doing here? Sharon didn't answer. She didn't even look at the other girls. She finally turned her head and looked me directly in the eyes. It wasn't a look of fear. It wasn't confusion. It was a look of profound, silent warning. A look that said, without a single word, "You need to leave. Right now." Before I could even process Sharon's look, the sound of engines cut through the air, 2 black Lincoln Town cars. They didn't cruise in looking for a parking spot. They pulled up fast, with a synchronized, practiced precision. They didn't stop at the pumps. They pulled straight to the back where we were standing, kicking up dust and the smell of exhaust. The doors didn't even fully open before Heather started working. She was like an usher at a theater. She started assigning girls to each car. You 3 in the first one, you 4 in the second. It was a system, it was a routine, it was a pickup. The first group piled in, the door slammed, and that car moved immediately. No hesitation, no, "Where are we going?" No giggling. Just the sound of tires on gravel. Then, the second car, it rolled forward and stopped right in front of me. The glass was so dark I could only see my own terrified reflection until the window began to slide down. Slowly. And there he was, a man, older, maybe in his late 40s or 50s. He was wearing expensive sunglasses that hid his eyes, and he was smiling. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a too calm smile. The kind of smile a person wears when they've already won a game you didn't even know you were playing. He leaned across the passenger seat, looked at us, and spoke in a voice that was smooth, practiced, and terrifyingly gentle. "Ready to go to the mansion, girls?" The other girls in the group lit up. The mansion. To a 13-year-old girl from a middle-class neighborhood, that word sounds like a fairy tale. It sounds like MTV Cribs. It sounds like the freedom Heather had been promising all week. To them, that word was an invitation to a dream. But to me, it felt like the name of a cage. The doors to the Lincoln are open. The girls behind me don't hesitate. They jump in like they're getting onto a school bus. They're laughing. They're talking about what they're going to buy with their money. Sharon follows them. She doesn't look back this time. She just disappears into the air-conditioned darkness of that black car. I'm the only one left on the pavement. I feel Heather's hand on the small of my back. It's not a friendly gesture. It's a nudge. A gentle, insistent shove toward the open door. And that's when something inside me, that strict upbringing, that supervised project life, actually saved me. For the first time in my life, my habit of questioning everything kicked in. I didn't move. I planted my feet on the hot asphalt and I stopped. I looked at Heather, I looked at the man in the sunglasses, and I started asking the questions no one else was asking. What is this, Heather? Where exactly are we going? Who is this man? Heather's face didn't soften. She didn't try to reassure me. Instead, her expression shifted into something jagged. She looked annoyed. Not worried for my safety, annoyed that I was breaking the rhythm of the machine. She leaned in close, her voice losing all that cool friend luster. She said something that would haunt me for the next 16 years. She said, "Out of all the girls I bring, you're the only one giving me a problem. Not invite, not hang out with. Bring. Like we were cargo, like we were inventory." And then she looked me up and down, looking at that innocent outfit she told me to wear, and she whispered, "With your body. And that look, you could make a killing." That was the moment. I didn't have the words for what was happening. I didn't know the terminology of the dark world I was standing on the edge of. I didn't fully understand it. But my blood did. And my blood told me to run. I snapped. I didn't just walk away, I exploded. I started yelling, not even words, just noise. to break the spell, I backed away from the car, my eyes locked on the man in the sunglasses. He didn't chase me, he just watched. He looked at me with the bored expression of a hunter who knew there was plenty of other prey in the car. I turned and I ran. I ran through the Florida heat until my lungs burned. I ran past the houses, past the palm trees, all the way back to the one place I spent my whole life trying to escape. I ran back to school. I walked through those gym doors, drenched in sweat, shaking, and completely terrified. I was embarrassed. I felt like a narc. I felt like I had failed the coolness test. I sat in the back of my next class, staring at the empty seats where Heather and Sharon should have been. I felt like a coward. I felt like I had abandoned my friends. I didn't know it then. I wouldn't know it for a long, long time. But that decision, that moment of being annoying, that was the moment I chose to have a future. I stopped hanging out with Heather. It wasn't a big dramatic breakup. I just became a ghost. I went back to being the supervised kid. I leaned into the rules my parents set. I sought out the strictness I used to hate, because now it felt like a suit of armor. Heather didn't give up immediately. She tried to pull me back in. She'd corner me in the hallway, acting like nothing happened. "Why are you being so weird?" she'd ask. "We missed out on so much money that day." I said no, every time. Eventually, she stopped asking. I became invisible to her again, but I couldn't stop seeing her. For the rest of middle school, I'd watch from the window of my dad's office or the back of the library. I'd see Heather walking toward the edge of campus, and she was never alone. Every week, there were different girls, new faces, younger girls who looked just as innocent as I had tried to look. I'd watch them walk toward that gas station like it was a routine, like it was just another Tuesday. It was a conveyor belt, a system that never stopped moving. I'd see the black cars in the distance idling, waiting. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell someone. But who would believe a 13-year-old girl saying her cool friend was a recruiter for a mansion? So I stayed quiet. I watched the cycle repeat until it became part of the background noise of my life. I walked away. I survived. But Sharon never found her way back to the school doors. Sharon didn't walk away. She stayed in the car. Sharon changed. It wasn't all at once. It was a slow, agonizing erosion. She became a shadow of the girl I knew in the tripod. She was depressed, withdrawn. She stopped laughing at our old jokes. She only stuck close to Heather. It was like she was tethered to her. She started missing school. Not just skipping for a day, but disappearing for weeks. When she did show up, she looked older. Not sophisticated older, tired older. And then one Monday morning, the seat next to me was empty. And it stayed empty. She never came back. Years later, through the grapevine of old classmates and social media, I found out the end of her story. Sharon took her own life. The light I'd seen in her when we were 12 had been completely extinguished by whatever happened in that mansion. 16 years after that day at the gas station, I was sitting on my couch. I turned on a documentary about a massive trafficking ring that had operated out of South Florida for decades. And there it was. The face of the man in the sunglasses, the mansion, the system. I wasn't just invited to a party. I was selected for a life that Sharon didn't survive. And the only reason I'm here to tell you this is because I was annoying enough to say no. For 16 years, that day lived in a locked box in the back of my mind. I told myself it was just a weird South Florida story, a creepy guy encounter. I convinced myself I was overreacting. Until last night, I was sitting in the dark, the blue light of the TV, the only thing illuminating the room. I was watching a documentary about a high-profile trafficking case, the kind of case that hits the national news, but feels a million miles away from your own life. The narrator was talking about entry points, about how these organizations didn't just snatch girls off the street. They used peers. They used girls who looked like us to find girls who looked like us. And then they showed the evidence locker. They showed a photo of a property, a mansion behind high gates in a neighborhood I recognized. My breath hitched. My hands started to shake so hard I had to put the remote down. Then came the faces, the survivors, and the lost. And there she was, a face I hadn't seen since a Florida middle school hallway. A girl who was in our honors classes. A girl I'd seen at the gas station that day, cheering for the money. She wasn't a missing person on a milk carton. She was a statistic in a federal investigation. Suddenly, every weird detail from that day clicked into place like a key turning in a lock. The innocent clothes, the usually. Heather wasn't just a wild friend. She was an employee. She was a recruiter. She didn't want to hang out with me. She wanted to sell me. And Sharon? Sharon wasn't her best friend. Sharon was her first successful delivery. I spent years feeling guilty for being the annoying one, for being the one who ran away and left my friends behind. But looking back at that 13-year-old girl, I realize now that my strict parents, the ones I resented so much, had unintentionally given me the only tool I needed to survive, the instinct to know when a boundary is being crossed. We like to think that danger looks like a monster in a dark alley. We think it looks like a hooded figure or a broken window. But the most dangerous situations in your life, they won't look like danger at all. They'll look like freedom. They'll look like the cool girl at school. They'll look like a mansion and a chance to finally be seen. Evil doesn't always come to you with a snarl. Sometimes it comes to you with an invitation and a smile. It took me 16 years to realize that I wasn't just skipping school that day. I was standing on the edge of a cliff. I was never supposed to be in that car. I was never supposed to leave that gas station. I got to grow up. I got to have a life. I got to realize the truth. But the scariest part, the thing that keeps me awake, how many other girls at that gas station said yes and never got the chance to say no?